All right, so because I only have 15 minutes on my YouTube videos, I realized that I got cut off halfway through this slide. So this is the last part of the PowerPoint. If I can get it on the screen, here we go. I was cut off when I was talking about the independent variable being the factor in the research design in the experiment that is being manipulated. For example, people who watch violent television programs, if the hypothesis is that they are going to engage in more aggressive behavior, the independent variable is actually watching the violent television program. You are going to be measuring, which is the dependent variable, the outcome, if their aggressive nature increases after exposure. So it's important in research, in experiments, to have two groups. Your experimental group is the group of participants who will be exposed to the violent television, and your control group is the group that you are comparing them against. You have to have a baseline for comparison when conducting experiments. So they will not, your control condition will not be watching the violent television programs. Then what you do after the experimental group is exposed to the violent television programs is you measure their level of aggression and you compare it against the control condition to see if in fact it did impact their aggressive nature. So this is a good slide that shows you 5 different terms: experiments, independent, dependent variable, experimental condition, and control condition. And you have to be able to, on the test, make sure that you can identify all of those things. Which group is the control, which group is the experimental group, and a big part of that depends on which one is being exposed to the independent variable. You figure that out and you know that that's the experimental group, all right? One of the things that experimenters have to be very careful about is experimenter bias. Sometimes researchers are so passionate about the experiment that they will unconsciously treat members of the experimental and control groups differently to increase the chance of confirming their hypothesis. So there are a couple ways that experimenters can try to prevent bias from occurring in their research. One is random assignment. Random assignment allows for whoever is participating in the research design to be brought into either the control group or the experimental group by chance. So very similar to random sampling in surveys, random assignments, let's say you have 100 participants, you would randomly select 50 for the control group and randomly select 50 for the experimental group, and that would minimize pre-existing differences between those assigned to the different groups. That will hopefully eliminate bias. Another way is what's called the double-blind procedure. That's when the research participants and the research staff are both ignorant about whether research participants have received a treatment or have received the placebo. So for example, if I was doing an Alzheimer's study and I was testing a medication to see whether or not it slows the progression of the Alzheimer's, I would have an assistant who I would give all the names of the participants to, and I would not give my assistant the information as to whether or not they're actually getting the Alzheimer med or they're getting the drug, or I'm sorry, the placebo, which is an inert substance like a sugar pill. Therefore, the assistant wouldn't be able to have that knowledge and interact with the people participating in the study and treat them any differently, knowing that they had either the placebo or they had the actual med. So the double-blind procedure helps eliminate bias as well. The placebo effect is when behavior changes as a result of expectation. It also can be more specifically defined as the effect on behavior caused by the administration of an inert substance or condition. which is assumed to be an active agent, but in all reality is just a sugar pill. So if you want to be sure that it's the actual drug, not the behavior, I'm doing a screencast right now, so give me a second. Then, okay, so sorry, interruption, but I'm just going to continue. If you want to make sure that the behavior is changing by the drug, you need to test whether or not it's the drug or if it's the inert substance. So if I have the belief that I'm actually getting the drug, but I'm getting the inert substance and my behavior changes, you know it's based on the expectation, which is the placebo effect. When you look at the different research methods we've talked about, you have a descriptive type of method that includes case studies, surveys, and naturalistic observations. You can see on this slide, it talks about what its purpose is, which would be to observe and record behavior. But I like too that it talks about the weaknesses, because all of these research designs have strengths and weaknesses. The weaknesses of a descriptive method is that you can't control the variables, and that especially with case studies, single cases might be misleading. With correlational studies, you're looking at finding a relationship between two variables and seeing if one variable predicts the outcome of another variable. So you use a lot of data to find out that information and see if there's a relationship. The weakness is that correlational studies can predict behavior, but it does not specify cause and effect. The only one that does that is the experiment. And that's where you manipulate a factor using random assignment. You manipulate the independent variable. The downside is that sometimes you can't generalize your findings to other contexts, or that it's unethical to manipulate certain variables. Last slide deals with ethics involved in research, with humans as well as animals. In humans, obviously, you need to have the informed consent of the participant, and if it's a minor, the parent could sign for the young child, like that of a naturalistic observation, like when I talked about Jacob going to our preschool setting, classroom here at the school, and having signed off saying that yes, in fact, students could observe and take note of his behavior. Another important guideline is to protect the individual participating in the research from harm and discomfort as much as possible. Same with animals. If you do have a participant that agrees to participate, you have to ensure that their confidentiality is protected. And if they do allow for their information to be given, you have to have their consent. Also, because sometimes it is necessary to deceive the participant, you need to fully debrief them afterwards so that they know what the nature of the research was about. If researchers don't follow these ethical guidelines, they can be subject to fines, they can even lose their license, and in worst case scenarios, if laws have been broken, they will obviously go to jail.